Great. All right. So thanks for coming, everybody. Let us know if you can't hear anything or if you have some audio issues, but we'll be communicating via chat. So take it away, Molly.
Yeah, so a little bit really quick about Film Impact Georgia. Just in case you are unfamiliar, we as an organization provide grants, education, and opportunities to filmmakers and creators with a diversity pledge. Big works to break down the socioeconomic barriers of entry into film and television for Georgia residents. Right now, we have our film grant. It's for short films for $5,000. Our applications are currently open for that. We've done 2 of those already, and we're in our 3rd. The deadline is July 15th. And so if you're interested in that, you can find information about it on our website, which is filmimpactgeorgia.org. We also have next week, as far as events coming up, we have a development lab that will be on Friday through Seed and Spark, or a distribution lab, excuse me, that will be through Seed and Spark on Friday, which will be completely free. So we'll be posting stuff about that right after this. And then we also have another one of these Ask a Pro Anythings with a producer from the company Vanishing Angle to come on and talk. And so we'll also be putting out information about that as this ends. And then on our website, we have COVID-19 resources, everything from free things that you can have access to mental health things, and then just access to information about what's going on. You should follow us on Instagram, Film Impact Georgia, or be a member of our Facebook group, which is Film Impact Georgia Community, to have access to all those kinds of things.
Great. Hey, everybody. My name is Raymond Carr. I'm one of the board members of Film Impact Georgia, and I will be moderating this discussion. So if you have any questions, go ahead and utilize the chat window. Molly's going to be looking at those and updating them, and we will take those questions as well. I have a series of my own questions, which I'm really excited about asking, because our guest today is actually the reason we're here. We had a really fun event with Angela a couple months back, and she was like, we should just do a thing, because people ask me the same questions all the time. So the idea was to put this out there and to like kind of field all these questions that she gets and a lot of other professionals get about getting in this industry and working as a working director. So we wanted to put this out there, and then we are recording it, so you'll be able to look at this later, or if you have to leave early, you'll be able to watch it as well. But I'm introducing our wonderful guest, Angela Gomes. She is a working director, works primarily in television, I believe, and has been doing this for many, many years. Has also worked as a first AD throughout Atlanta, and so she has a lot of really awesome things to share with us. So I'll just have Angela say a couple words about herself, and then we'll jump into the questions here.
Hi, guys. Hope everyone's doing well. Out there, what do you call it? Sheltering at home. My name's Angela Barnes Gomes. Like you said, I'm a TV director. I came up as an AD. I was an AD for a very long time and transitioned from being a first AD into a director. I don't know. I don't want to say too much about myself and see what you guys really want to know. I'm from Georgia. I grew up. I went to St. Pius High School. I went to University of Georgia. I worked for cable advertising in Metro Atlanta back in the day when that was around, back when the Metco cable was a thing. I was an editor for them for a year, and then heard about something called the Assistant Director Training Program through the Directors Guild, and applied for the LA one and got in. And that was back in the 90s, and started off as a trainee. I did things as a trainee. I did a show called Burke's Law, Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman, JAG. I did movies, Mr. Wrong, starring Ellen DeGeneres back when she was doing romantic comedies. And I did Time to Kill. And then after I graduated, I started off doing some Stephen Bochco stuff. Murder One was a show for him. Another show for him called Total Security. I did Still I Got a Groove Back, and then started moving on. Did Crossing Jordan was my first key second job. The show Eve was my first AD job. And then Eve was also my first directing job. And after I got that first directing job, I started thinking about seriously doing that for a living. And that's when I moved back to Georgia and kind of leaned in here. I did some stuff for TBS. They were doing these little micro series within a series. I did one called My Nanny, which aired for 4 seasons. And then I did one called what was it, Jillian and Georgia, which went for 1 season. And so between that, went back and forth between ADing, and finally just decided it was time to lean in, and leaned in and did some programs. I did the ABC program, and I did the Fox program, which I guess now it would be the ABC with Fox program, but they've merged. And a lot of shadowing, and started working pretty steady about 3 years ago. So for the last 3 years, it's been I think my last first AD job was the last season of Atlanta.
Great. Angela, you're kind of quiet, Angela. I wonder if you can either adjust that or speak up a little louder.
Okay, hold on.
It may just be on your end.
Let me go into my preferences and see if that is a way to fix that. Sorry, guys. And you know what I can also do is see if a Bluetooth headset might help instead. Let me grab my headset.
Great.
Or if I lean in, is that better? Is this better?
Yeah, leaning in is definitely the easiest version.
Volume. How about that? Is this better now?
Yeah.
Better?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much. Okay, great. So that seems like you've been going you've been going through workshops and classes and things that are a little more formalized on that level. Obviously, there's a lot of information out there, so we won't spend too much time deep diving onto that. But I'm wondering, one of the things that people don't always know is that there's an agent for everything, and representation and how you deal with that. Can you talk a little bit about getting representation in the industry?
Yeah, I think a lot about getting an agent. It's hard because it's one of those things where nobody wants to sign you until you've done something, but then how do you do something until you get an agent? I was lucky that I was the first AD on a show that gave me a shot as a director. And so a lot of times directors will get their first shots if they're like an editor or already something on the show. Usually it's a department head, although I've heard of Chuck Lorre had a show on Netflix. I can't remember the name of it, but I remember he gave the second got an opportunity to direct 2 or 3 of the episodes because she wanted to be a director. So once you have a few under your belt, then people are willing to take a chance on you. And usually it's just from word of mouth. You know, I had a couple of people called me that, you know, friends that had a representation had mentioned to their agents that I was out and kind of on the come up and that they might be interested. Through the program I did through ABC Disney, they give you an executive mentor, which is really great. Joe DeSante, who's the vice president of current at ABC, was my mentor. And so she made some calls to Paradigm and Gersh. So I got meetings with them. But I'll be honest, a lot of them, like the bigger agencies, both Paradigm and Gersh, Gersh was very nice about it and Paradigm was not very nice about it. But both of them basically said, why would we spend all this time trying to break you when I could spend less time on somebody who's already out there? So I ended up signing with a smaller agency, Brant Rose agency, that has been great. That I like the fact that they're small because they can spend more. I never have trouble getting them on the phone. I never have trouble with them calling me back. I get a ton of meetings. And the way that they found me is I went to one of those, they have like these like speed date mixers for up and coming directors to have with people that are execs or showrunners and stuff. And they had one of those and they had, oh my God, it was like almost like mail or a bride catalog. It was like a little packet they gave to everybody that was an exec that came there that had all of our headshots and then our little bio of what, you know, what our genre that we were into and a little bit about ourselves. And somebody's agent got a hold of the packet and saw that I did not have a representation listed and called me and asked if I was with anybody. And I had a meeting with them and I liked their vibe and I signed with them.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But one more thing though.
Yeah.
2 years ago at the Atlanta Film Festival, there was also that Screencraft Writers Festival thing that kind of was paired with the Atlanta Film Festival. Remember that?
Yeah.
So they had panels with agents and managers. And at the time I had an agent and no manager and wasn't sure if I really needed a manager. But when I was there, I made sure to listen really carefully to what they were talking about and then think of a very intelligent question I could ask to stand out. And I stood up and I asked I said, hi, I'm Angela, I'm a director, I do this. And I just had a question about managers and blah. And after that event was over, the person running the event, who I had just met like the day before, emailed me asking if she could pass my information because 2 of the 3 managers on the panel wanted my information. So like, you don't have to be in LA to make the connections. And I know that I think somebody, I want to say, I don't want to say her name because I'm wrong about her. I know somebody from that same festival signed with one of the other managers that year. That was a Georgia person. And it's one of those things that you need to be seen. Like if you're at home, if you just send somebody something to read, they're not going to read it. If you just send somebody your reel, they're probably not going to watch it. But if they see you and can tell you're not crazy and there's something about you that they connect with, then you have a chance to get in. I just wanted to throw that out there.
That's really great. I'm going to do one more question regarding managers and agents, and then we'll get to some audience questions. So a lot of us working in the film industry who are filmmakers, we talk about pitches, and we're dealing with pitches where you're trying to pitch for money or you're trying to pitch to a studio. Television is a little different, especially when you already have representation. So when you have a job offer through your agent, or maybe you have a potential for a job offer through your agent, how do you go about talking to the specific show about what makes you the right director to be hired for them? Or is it more of just they already know who you are?
It's a little bit of both. Most of the time, I go on a lot of, they call the meetings generals. So it's not a meeting for a specific job. It's just a meeting so that they know who you are, right? So my analogy I like to use is peanut butter, right? So say you have Raymond Carr peanut butter, right? And you don't have an agent, so you're selling it out the back of your trunk, right? Your best friends will probably buy the peanut butter, but even your good friends that aren't your best friends might buy one to be nice, and then that's it, right? Unless it's like the best peanut butter ever, right? So word of mouth, you might be able to get out there a little bit. Your agent, you find an agent, they put you on the store shelves, but they still need to get somebody to know who you are. People are still going to buy Skippy or Jif or whatever hippie stuff that they like to buy, right? So your agent needs to has parties basically, or send you out with samples of your peanut butter to random people. But a lot of times they already have a full thing of peanut butter in their shelf. Or when they go to the store, all the peanut butter they're used to buying is already there. So you have to wait for them to A, be out of peanut butter, and then B, the store be out of the regular peanut butter before they're willing to go like, oh yeah, I remember trying that Raymond peanut butter. I'll try that, right? So most of my meetings are, we just want to know who you are, so that down the road something comes up, we'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that girl, she was cool. So that's how most of my meetings come up. But every now and then it'll be someone going, oh, I need peanut butter now, and there's no peanut butter. What other peanut butter's out there? And then I'll take a meeting. So, like with Legacies, which shoots here in Georgia, Julie Pleck is the showrunner, lovely woman. I love her. Whatever she needs forever, I will help her with whatever. And Lauren Petsky is kind of her right hand, who helps with her production company. And they said they just wanted a meeting. They just wanted a general just to see, it's not like they had a specific episode for me in mind or anything like that. And it turns out me and Lauren live like 3 streets away from each other and both met up at the restaurant around the corner, had a great meeting. And even though I had never done any genre stuff, I'd only done the quad in terms of 1 hour stuff. I'd done mostly multi-camera stuff. I got hired on Legacies because they liked my peanut butter, So, and then that turned into, I did a good job on that, and they brought me back for this last season. I had a good time, and I'm supposed to come back for season 3. So that, and then, if she does other stuff, then hopefully I'll be able to do other stuff. Or if somebody calls her and says, how do I do? Then she says, good things. And so the word of mouth kind of gets out, and that's how you get the job.
And you have to make sure they're not allergic to peanut butter.
Exactly. Because you know what? Or, some people are just, there's been meetings that I've had that I've left and I've just told my agents, I'm like, I didn't like the vibe, man. Like, you just like, this is not a good fit for me. And in the beginning, it's hard because in the beginning, you just want to say yes to everything. You're like, is it like Nazi propaganda? No? Okay, great. Then I'll do it. Right. Whatever it is, I'll say yes. And so it's nice to kind of get to, there's shows that are out there now, like when the Roseanne was acting crazy, I was like, whatever you do not put me up for Roseanne. I don't want to do the show. So, it may not have even been a possibility for me to do that show, but I don't want my agents to be making calls and trying to get through the groundwork for something and find out later that I don't want it. And there's a couple other shows that are out there that I thought were problematic that I do it. Every 6 months or so, I'll just go down the list and be like, hey, these are the shows I would kill people to do. These are the shows I really would never do ever, ever, ever. these are the shows, you know, that are like shows that I would do if the check's right. And these are the shows that I think would be fun, but who knows, right? And then there's stuff that they know about that I don't know about that they put me up for. I mean, like Slutty Teenage Bounty Hunters was one I hadn't even heard of. And I thought it was like one of my best experiences on set. It was so much fun. The producers were awesome. The cast was great. The scripts was really funny. And I had a great time that I never would have known to even ask for it.
Yeah, really excited about that project. Great. Molly, do you want to take a question from the audience?
Yeah, so kind of jumping into specifics about actually directing, Rosalind wanted to know, like, how much time you get to prepare for an episode, and then do you get access to each department beforehand? Or are you kind of like walking into the fire?
I'm supposed to. So for a half an hour, okay, so I direct 3 different genres of television. I do multi-camera sitcom TV, which is like your standard, like The Jeffersons was, or, you know, The Cosby Show, or I'm trying to think of one that's out that's now that I do, like Carol's Second Act is one that I just did, or One Day at a Time. Those are all multi-camera TV where it's like a little play, you got 4 cameras on PEDs or dollies, and it's like a live audience and laugh track and all that. That schedule is 2 days of rehearsals. 3 days of rehearsals and 2 days of shooting. So the first day literally is a production meeting with all the department heads there, a table read with all the cast there, rehearse for a few hours, and then the next 2 days are basically rehearsals. And kind of as things come up, we might mention to this different department, like, oh, she has to do this thing on the set, make sure she's wearing pants so she doesn't flash anybody, or make sure that, you know, the remote control we have for this scene is big enough that it has this kind of button on it or something. That stuff's pretty straightforward, so it's not that complicated. And then we shoot, so we have those 3 days, and then we have 2 days of shooting. We'll block and shoot, and the second day we'll block and shoot in the morning, and then have a live audience that afternoon. And then I do half-hour comedies, which are anywhere from 4 to 5 days of shooting per episode, and are anywhere from 3 to 4 days of prep. Generally, they will have a production meeting with everybody, and I'll have individual meetings with different departments as we go through, you know, and usually there's a concept meeting, which if everybody doesn't, I'm just going to assume people maybe don't know all the terms, so I'll explain them, but I'll explain them quickly, and always hit me back if they don't get it. But like a concept meeting is basically like, what is it that we think we want? And then the production meeting is, this is what we're doing. So the concept meeting will say, okay, there's a scene where Angela's sitting in her bedroom on her computer. We need a bed, we need a computer, we need her shirt with a thing cut off. I want to make sure that she has her hair up out of her face, so we make sure hair gets that note, and make sure that she won't be wearing her glasses because she doesn't want the glare on her glasses, right? So that's the concept meeting. And then when the production meeting, we go, okay, well, we decided on the Biz Marquis shirt, and we decided on the hoop earrings, and we decided on the bun hair, and blah, blah, blah. And then it gets more, and then you meet with individual departments as you need. If there's stunts, you'll meet with stunts. If there's special stuff. And then for 1 hour stuff, generally we'll shoot anywhere from 6 to 8 days, and I'll get anywhere from 6 to 8 days of prep, usually about 6 or 7 days of prep. Same thing, there always seems to be a lot more meetings, just because there's a lot more moving parts for like the 1 hour drama stuff. You might have shootouts with legacies, there's like visual effects, there's stunts, there's makeup effects, there's, you know, all the stuff of like, how do we do vampires, how they do the vamping, moving really fast, speed, and talking to them about how we do that, how, you know, had a whole series of meetings about how to change this teen boy from a boy to a werewolf, stuff like that. That's prep.
Great. Coming to that, you know, because television shows are kind of machines that have already been moving, especially with something like Legacy, where that's a spinoff from Vampire Diaries, which had about 1 million seasons. Yeah. So you'd imagine that a lot of the keys and just the showrunners, you know, it's old hats. So if you come in with like, hey guys, I got a great idea, they might roll their eyes at you or something like that. So how do you manage, you know, knowing your place and like knowing when to push the envelope and then where to coast? Or is it just such a machine that you kind of just have to go with the flow and you know, keep your head down?
It's a little bit of everything. I like to compare my job. If I'm directing a feature, I'm the boss. I'm mom. I decide what happens to the baby, right? As a TV director, I'm the nanny. So I'm taking care of the baby. I'm maybe with the baby more than mom and dad are with the baby, But if mom says the baby's a vegan, I don't give the baby a hamburger. Even if the baby looks anemic, I figure out another way to fix that, whatever that problem is, right? So it's about seeing the vision that's already been put out there. I can't come in on Legacies and saying, oh, you know, I think Hope should be played by this new actress that I just saw. No, Hope has been played by the same actress since she was on the originals, right? It's not going to suddenly be some new actor. The school should be this super modern, you know, like we should use the High Museum as the set for the school. No, we've already had this old mansion as the set for the school. These are decisions that as a director on a feature, I would be making. But because I'm coming into the TV show, the look, the vibe, the cast, all that's already been decided for me. So my job is to take, what story am I telling this week? What story are we trying to tell? How do I best tell that story in the language that has been established on the show? So my ideas are, oh, well, I know this show is a really cinematic show, so these are the places I can be really cinematic. Or, oh, I know this show is really into the visual effects, so I know to not waste a lot of time being fancy with a two-hander, you know, two people talking at a table, and spend time making sure things look really cool, and we're doing all sorts of like transitions and vampires flying or whatever, you know, that kind of stuff. So it's not like you can just hop on and it's like IKEA furniture where you're just putting slot A into tab B and it's not thinking about it. But it's about bringing in like kind of the most, you know, the most creative thing that you can, you know, to their vision. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And on top of that, working with actors, you know, I come from a theater background in the indie film world where there's a lot of conversations about how to psychologically get into the actors' mentality to get them to do what you want and like really come at it from different angles. Whereas a lot of people on these shows, they have been doing these characters and they'll know these characters better than any director that comes in. So when you have a note or when you have an idea, how do you, can you give some examples of like approaching actors or just in general dealing with actors that have been established?
So actors are people, not puppets. And they are a living and breathing part of the team that it takes to make your show. And I think sometimes directors forget that. So for me, my main thing is to be as prepared as possible and to listen to what the actors have to say, because that usually will keep me from saying a note that's a dumb note that doesn't make sense for their character. I like to do actor meetings, which does not happen a lot on most shows, but it's something that I try to make happen on my shows, specifically the dramas. The comedy's not as much because usually the character development is not as deep, but especially on a show like Legacies, where you have all this mythology on top of the character development, I like to sit and talk with actors during prep, not even about my episode. I talk to them about their character, what they struggle with their character as actors, what are things that directors do that they think they're being helpful that aren't helpful, because I know sometimes people react differently. So that way, before we even get to set, I have a language to speak to the actors in a way. Also, like one of my favorite questions to ask is like, what do you know about your character that the writers don't know? I think a lot of times, especially in a first season show, or if you're like number 4, 5, or 6 on the call sheet, your character never gets developed all the way. You know a vibe of who your character is and kind of a rough who they, you know, where they came from and what are their origins and that kind of stuff. But like I had an actor be like, oh, well, like this character is this certain way and is having this reaction to their dad. Well, my dad was like an alcoholic that did X, Y, and Z. And so what I've been doing is I've been kind of using this character, using my dad as a placeholder until I get more backstory like this. And so then we went in a conversation about the dad. So when we were in the show on set and things are moving a mile a minute and I have to give a note about how he's reacted to his dad, I have a whole history of his relationship with his father that I can draw from to use as a note versus, well, he's you know, not a good dad or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to me, knowing the story I'm trying to tell obviously is most important, but I think having a two-way street line of communication with actors is also important. Especially during a first season show, because like most of the time actors are just trying not to be recast, right? If I'm being real. They're like, this first season, The actors aren't really sure what's what yet in the show. The producers aren't always sure. I mean, you've seen a show, like we've seen the pilot or the first episode, and the rest of the season is nothing like it because they've kind of shifted, or they decide something works better, or how they wrote one character doesn't work for the actor or whatever. So like actors are hesitant to say something doesn't feel right because they don't want to be the squeaky wheel. They just want to, I'll do it however you say to do it because I just don't want to get fired. I don't want to get recast. So I make sure that they feel comfortable enough to tell me, you know, like this feels wrong in my bones. I don't think I would do this. All right, let's talk about it. I'm not going to get mad about it. I might still tell you to do it my way anyway, you know?
That's great.
Yeah. But some actors are like, I mean, the actors I've had that are difficult that are like, difficult. I don't think they're difficult. That are like, just don't tell me what to do. I know. I mean, I'll be honest, like know the character, hit their mark, got their lines. Like if they got all that, they don't want anything from me and they're still giving me what I need. Like I got no ego about it. I'm like, great, let's move on.
Great. Molly, do you have another audience question?
Yeah, Sherry was asked if you can remember the first time you stepped onto a set where you were being paid as the director. Did anything surprise you? Because obviously you have a lot of like first AD experience, but obviously it's totally different being the person in charge.
I compare it to driving. Like you're in the passenger seat all your life, and then the first time you drive the car by yourself, it's like, ah! So like I had been an AD on Eve for 2 seasons, and it was halfway through season 3 when I directed the episode I directed, and I still was like, why am I terrified? Like I was still so like anxious, and at one point we called like a 5-minute break for something, and I went in my office and sat under my desk. He was like, you're gonna be okay. And then as soon as I opened the door, it was like, Angela, and I just said, and then they opened the door and they're like, Angela, and I was like, and they closed the door and I was like, okay, it's gonna be okay, it's gonna be okay. So like to me that was the biggest surprise. And then it's like driving, and once you start driving, and then after a while you're not scared anymore. Now I'm not scared.
That's great. So talking about the AD world, you know, I come from art department world in a crew position, and when I direct, I sometimes find myself empathizing with the crew a little too much. You know, like, because when you're a crew, you're just like, you want to make a good product, but you also want to get home. You want to make sure that, you know, you're not going to kill your anybody under you and all that kind of stuff. But as a director and a producer, sometimes you got to really fight for the things you want and the time you have and all those sorts of things. So what are some of the skill sets and benefits of being an AD coming from a crew position that you've taken? And what's things that you kind of had to let go from an AD position when you started directing?
Letting go is definitely the schedule. Not going over the schedule with a fine-tooth comb and being like, well, are you sure we shouldn't do it this way? Are you sure? And like, now I'm like, you know the show, you've been in here, you know who works, how they work, blah, 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 blah. Unless something's glaring, I let the schedule go. Just tell me where to go and I'll say action, right? I think it helps me in that I know how to talk to people. I think people sometimes who come from only being the person in charge, like if you were always a director and like smaller crew and worked your way up and never had to manage a large crew, sometimes people just don't know how to talk to people, whether it's just from a manners standpoint, because I think because they're in charge, they can talk to people any way, or from a communication standpoint. I've seen a lot of directors, especially directors that came from other genres, whether they came from commercials or came from, you know, theater or came from, you know, indies. It's just different. The hierarchy works different on set. The chain of command's a little different. The, you know, every show is a little different in terms of how they work, and being able to adapt to that can be tricky. And so being able to communicate, I mean, if you're a director who's worked with the same DP all the time, it can be hard for you to all of a sudden be working with a different DP every few weeks to have that shorthand of explaining what it is that you want. Or if you have a DP whose aesthetic is completely different than yours, you both have to get on the same page in terms of what the aesthetic of the show is, but you have to be able to say, this is what I want, and not, that's not what I want. And as a first AD, I saw a lot of that. So I knew like what things I needed to know the answers to and what things I could say, I don't know yet, but I'll get back to you on. I think a lot of times directors they get overwhelmed, or they get scared of looking weak or something, that they or they get, you know, I've had seen directors that are just like, I don't know about anything. They don't make any decisions until the last minute. And then the crew's scrambling to get them stuff. Like, I know the logistics that if I'm like, I want a tailored suit with a blue tie, it sounds easy, but they don't just pull it out of their ear. So I need to know what it is that I want. So I think that's the thing that prepped me the best, is to know how the sausage is made. So when I ask for something, I know what's involved.
That's great. So, like, coming from your crew experience, I don't want to say what are some of the mistakes, but what are some? I mean, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but can you go a little bit more into, like, maybe just tips that you saw some directors just did well, and other directors just did not do it well at all, that you kind of took onto your world? You talked about just being making decisions faster, but can you dive a little bit more into, like, specificity about do's and don'ts, maybe?
Okay. Things that I've run into, mistakes I have made. Sometimes when you're trying to feel out, and it's a mistake I'm going to continue to make. It's not a mistake, it's really avoidable. In feeling out the show, you have to feel out when you can push for what you want and when you need to back off. Because again, you're the nanny, you're not the mom. Some people are like, run with it. And you're like really run with it? And they're like, yeah, run with it. And then you run with it. And they're like, no, why are you doing that? and you're like, but no, remember you said run with it, you know? So, like, is trying to do whatever you can to understand who it is that you're working with and what they really, like, how they really work is important. Actors aren't puppets is another big mistake I see directors doing. They come in with their plan, and it has to be their plan. But, you know, words are, in a script is a kind of a breathing, living thing. And so once you involve the actors in that process, and then the sets in that process, and then the costumes in that process, and, you know, the fact that the stage is 3 degrees, you know, when it's, you know, freezing outside in the process, it is going to affect what happens in that set. So you have to be able to pivot, and you have to be able to bend, and you have to be able to make changes that still serve the story, without getting flustered and without getting bullied into going, oh, well, you know, we can do it faster this way. Like you said, people want to go home, so you have to pick your battles of when you want to do that extra shot 10 million times. Is that shot of 2 people talking at a table? Do you really need to get the shot of them at the table in a wide, a 50-50, and over a tighter and even tighter, and then cutaways of the waiter? Or can you do the whole thing in 2 setups? You know what I mean? Like, ultimately, it's up to you. But you need to really think about, like, what is the story I'm trying to say? You know, how does this serve the story overall? Could this time be better spent making another scene that's actually like a bigger scene and a more important moment in the story I'm trying to tell better and more beautiful than this little one-off that's giving me this one little piece of information that's only going to be 45 seconds when we cut it down on screen, you know?
Yeah.
Being nice to people, you know. I always say being nice to people is important. I'm surprised at how many directors aren't. Knowing people's names is very important, or at least pretending that you know people's names, like, hey, saying good morning and stuff, you know, that kind of stuff goes a long way. I like it, and I appreciate when people do it to me. So even if I space in somebody's name, I have in my iPad that I use, I always keep the back of the call sheet so I can be like, I'll say to the script, I'm like, okay, that was that guy right there. I'll go, oh, thanks, Joe. You know, I'll make sure to try to say it even if I don't remember it in the moment. Yeah, don't be bullied. Sometimes people will try to bully you into stuff, especially if you're a chick. It happens. I had a meeting once on a show where the producer asked me, well, hey, like, have you ever get like mansplained or anything like kind of that stuff happen to you on set? And I'm like, yeah, you know, it happens. You know, it's kind of comes with the territory. So, well, and how do you deal with that? And I said, well, you know, I'm a Black woman, so I can't yell about it, or people will think call me the angry Black woman, and they won't hire me. So I usually make a joke. You know, if it's really really bad, I'll call them on it. But if it's something that's whatever, I try to be cool about it. He's like, oh, okay, good, because, you know, our DP and our first AD sometimes can really kind of lean in on their own agenda, and they're especially bad with the female directors. And I was like, oh, and in my head, I'm like, why the fuck is this dude telling me about them being mansplaining pushy people with female directors instead of telling them to stop it, you know? But alas, that was the culture on that show. So in that show, I knew that people were going to try to bully me into what their agenda was. And I had to pick my battles. And if it was something I didn't care about, I would give them the win. And then if it was something I did care about, I'd be like, no, this is what I want. And there were times where the first AD would talk over me and say, okay, so guys, this is what we're going to be doing here. And I'd be like, no, actually, that's not what we're doing. That's not what I said. This is what we're going to do. Big smile. See, not angry. And lay it out. So, you know, and my thing is, it depends on the show. If it's a show I'm going to be going back to over and over again, I'll pull them aside and be like, yo, not cool. Don't do that. If it's a show I'm going to be on and in my head, I'm like, I'm never coming back to this place. Like, I'll write it out and try not to make waves, because down the road, you just don't know what other show the showrunner might have that doesn't have that one person on the crew that you didn't like. You know what I mean? And you don't want to be the problematic person over one dude who had a bad day, whose mom didn't give him enough hugs when he was little. You don't want him being the reason why you're not working.
That's great. Molly, do we have another audience question?
Yeah, Nikki wants to know, would you venture to feature films, or does television provide more work for you?
I would only do feature films if they were like a studio feature or like or Netflix or something like that. The indie film world does not work for my life because I have 2 kids and I'm a single mom. And with indie film, your life becomes your film. And I don't have the time because it's so much time. TV is great because it's bites. I have a week that I spend if I go in, that I spend on a multi-camera show. I got 2 weeks on a half-hour show, and I got 13 days or 15 days if it's a 1-hour show. And then I'm done. And then they'll call me to do some post a few days later. I get 2 days of post on a half hour and 4 days of post on an hour. And a lot of times I can do that remotely if they do that in LA, where I don't have to leave my kids. And then I'm done. That story is told. That story is done. I don't touch it. I don't do anything. I don't say anything about it. I don't even know what it looks like at the end until it airs on TV, because the producers do their own version, and then they put whatever effects and stuff and music in. I am not even involved in that stuff. But like if it was something like for Netflix, where it was a self-contained something where I'm not involved in the fundraising part of it or the promoting of it, I just have to shoot it and cut it and tell the story, and I don't have to go on any kind of festival tour with it when it's over. I can do that because that's not going to take me away from my kids.
Great. Another question, Molly?
Yeah, so Charles actually asked, does the difference in shows that can be binged on Netflix versus like network shows have any subtle impacts on your directing or your interactions with the producers?
Directing, yes. Interactions with producers, not as much. Directing, just because like if I hate doing inserts. I loathe inserts. But if it's a Netflix show, sometimes I'll do an insert because I know people might be watching on their phone. And if I just tag it like this, they may not be able to see what it is that I'm trying to show because they're not watching it on their TV. And even though I know people watch TV on their phones, it's just more people watch TV on their TV, or at least on something bigger, I think. And then also act breaks are different, because an act break is going to go in or out of a commercial, then I might make a bigger moment of something than I would if I knew it was going to go right into another scene versus going into a tied commercial.
Mm-hmm.
For your experience with Netflix, can you speak a little bit about that in general? Because you talked a little bit about like things like act breaks and things of that nature. But with a show on Netflix, they pretty much have the entire season ready to go. Like as opposed to a show that like Eve, where you're kind of still writing episodes as you're shooting the series. So does that maybe not confine you, but answer a lot of questions that you would have had, just because are you able to deal with other directors that may be directing episodes before or after you? How does that work a little bit?
I tried it, like when I'm coming in, like on, I think Bounty Hunters, I did episode like 6 or 7, something in there. And so I tried to watch whatever episodes they already had they had up to like a producer cut of, or a director cut. Like I'm not allowed to see a cut before the director turns in their director cut. So I would try to see whatever rough cuts that they had to see kind of like what's the kind of style they've been using. Do they have a particular style? Some shows are like, we don't really have a style yet, do what you want. And those I love, because then I can be as creative or not, as wonky and weird, or is, you know, whatever I want to do. And the hard part is, though, because it's still a 1 hour, they still give you the same, like, 6 days of prep, 7 days of shoot, or 8 days of shoot, but you're shooting like another day's worth of stuff, because a 1 hour on TV, a network, is really only 42 minutes, but a 1 hour on Netflix is like 55, 60 minutes, you know? So sometimes it feels like you're almost going a little faster than you want to. It always seems like you don't have enough time to do what you want. But yeah, I think that's probably the main difference. And then just the standards, because there are no like standards for Netflix. For TV, I know what words we're allowed to say. They'll give me explicit directions if it's a love scene, what parts of the body we're allowed to see. When it was on Netflix, it's like, well, it depends on what the show is. What is this show trying to be? You know, like, it's tricky. So
would you interact with the other directors on a show like Netflix because it is so self-contained? Or are you reading all of their scripts before? Or
I'll read all the scripts before my episode. I'll watch what I can, and I'll read whatever's not already in the can. And then I usually will touch base. I'll go to a set and say hi to whatever director is shooting while I'm prepping. And then when I'm shooting, whatever director is coming in the prep, I'll usually pop into their office and say hi. And then I'll always say, like, hey, anything I need to know? Because usually there's always, like, who's the crazy person? And, you know, it's like, you know, your family says you can talk smack about your brother to your sister, but you can't talk smack about your brother to a stranger, you know? So, like, sometimes they don't always want to tell you who the crazy is on the show. So the other directors will sometimes say, oh, yeah, you know, keep it on the scripty because she is really great at this but doesn't pay attention to this. Or, oh, yeah, this actor just got dumped by his girlfriend, so just know that, you know, he's very emotional or something. But that's about it. I don't talk to them about directory stuff.
Great. Molly, any more?
Yeah. Well, Jacqueline actually asked the question, which is, if you're coming from a corporate background, but I feel like it could be any background, how do you get started in the TV industry as a writer and director with no experience?
It's very tricky. As a director, you need to have a calling card. So you need to just be doing stuff, whether it's like everyone says, oh, you can shoot stuff on your phone. I mean, you can. That's the thing, is you kind of can. This business is who you know. And so I would say get out and meet as many people as you can, and don't meet people with the intention of trying to get a job or trying to move up in the world. Find your people that are other creatives, you know, like, because those people in a few years will be up and have fingers and stuff that they may be able to help you out with later, but you don't want to work with people unless you like them. So only look for people that you would want to hang out with, even if they worked at Jiffy Lube, you know what I mean? So for me, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I was straight out of college and I was an editor. So I went through like the training program, which was for ADs. It's not for writing and directing. You know, if you get any kind of festival recognition, that kind of thing helps with people looking out for you as a director. But I always hate when people say that too, because it's almost like, oh, well, you want to play basketball for a living? Just be like Michael Jordan or Kobe, and, you know, people will recognize you. I mean, it's really, there's not really one way to get in. As a writer, it's a little bit easier. There's writing programs, and those programs are based on your writing. The directing programs are harder because it's based on your samples, but it's also based on who you know. They want to know what other part of the application, once you get past a certain level, is who do you know that would hire you or would consider hiring you? And then how do you know those people if you've never been on a set before, you know? I did a whole propaganda campaign for myself to get in the ABC Disney program. It was every 2 years. So it was 2012. So I knew I wanted to be part of the 2014 cycle. So mid-2012, I was like, who knows anybody in the ABC Disney program? Whatever show I worked on, whatever exec I worked with, I would find a way to mention it. And they'd go, everybody seemed to know Tim, who's one of the main guys that runs it. And then there was a woman named Emerlyn and another woman named Janine. And somebody always knew one or two of those guys. And so I would say, I'm going to call you. They're like, oh, well, do you want me to put a good name in for you or a good word in for you? And I would say, no. when I call you, I want you to. And so literally every few months, I would call the person who I remembered and have them call the program and say, oh, yeah, there's this girl that you should know about. So by the time I got there with my application, they're like, oh, yeah, we've heard about Angela. So I kind of was ushered into the second round because they had heard things about me. And then this woman, Carol Kirshner, God bless Carol Kirshner. Carol Kirshner was an exec at CBS for a long time. And she runs her own management company now called Park on the Lot. And she runs the showrunner training program through the WGA. I was at a random comedy intensive workshop that I read about, Steve Kaplan's comedy workshop, and that I'd signed up for in LA. That was like a weekend little class. And most of the people there taking the class were like, you know, regular people like me. They were like bartenders that did like open mic nights. They were, you know, some film students that were there. So like the first day, we all sit around and we're all having lunch together and we're all talking about, oh, what do you do? Oh, I do this. Oh, what do you do? And I was one of the few people that actually worked in business, right? And Carol was like, Carol introduces herself, and I'm thinking that she's like, you know, a housewife who's an empty nester who wants to like write a script because she, you know, she had the great nails and the hair and the expensive clothing that looked like it was nothing, but you could tell it was like a $700 outfit. And she's like, no, I'm like this awesome ex-exec at CBS. And so then just after, she just happened to be the one that sat next to me. The next day at lunch, she's like, we should have lunch today. I'm like, oh, great. Where should I tell the guys we're all going to go to lunch? She's like, no, it should just be you and me. And then we sat down for lunch. We order our lunch. And she looks at me and she goes, okay, Angela, you seem great. What is it that you need? Why isn't that you aren't out directing? And I'm like, well, you know, access, whatever. So she literally said, okay. And she takes out a notebook and starts writing stuff down. And the next week I had meetings with ABC, NBC, CBS, and an agent. Didn't sign with that. The agent told me to fuck off, but still I had a meeting with them, right? So like the fact is you don't know where you're going to run into these people. So like go out in the world. It's so funny. She came back to do like, I think WIFTA had her out for an event out. And I called her. I'm like, you're in Atlanta. I'm buying you an expensive dinner. I always said if I ever booked a network show, I'm buying you dinner. And I finally got to buy her dinner last year. But that shit happens. I've done that. I've made phone calls on behalf of probably 4 or 5 of my friends at this point that meet my agents. I'm not trying to hoard them. If I think that they would be if I honestly think they'd be a good fit with my agents, and I know they're not crazy, and I know they're good in the room, and I know that they have the work to back themselves up, sure, I'll make the introduction. Next. It's weird. It's weird talking to silence. I can't tell.
Okay, sorry. I got muted for a second. Yeah, that's really interesting. Can you talk a little bit about those programs? Because I know a lot of people have, they are aware that they exist, and maybe they have even applied for some. But can you talk a little bit about specifics about how they were actually conducted and what maybe some of the things that you really like gleaned from them for you?
They were both very different. I did ABC, and then I did ABC Disney, and I did Fox. So ABC Disney had 10 of us in. 5 were comedy, 5 were drama. Almost everybody had experience. One was from theater. There was a scriptie there. There was another actor. Oh my God, it was Brian Gummersall, who was, I'm sorry, Devin Gummersall, who played Brian from My So-Called Life, was in my ABC Disney class. And I was just like, oh yeah, nice to meet you. And then when it was all over, I was like, oh my God, it's Brian. So we had an actor, but it was all people who, you know, it was a guy who done, you know, a bunch of some low budget films and stuff. There's all people who had been working in it, you know, and it was all it felt very professional. They gave all of us a professional mentor and gave us some things to shadow and then kind of sent us on our way. I don't think anybody from my class got a job out of that program. And then Fox was the opposite. Fox was all like up and comers. It was all like people who'd done web series. It was all people who had like, you know, a short that went to Sundance or like had done some indie films that had gone to some festivals and stuff. It was all, I felt like a schmuck, you know, like in the other place I felt like, you know, everybody else was other crew people. This one, I'm like, what am I doing with all these artists? Like, they're so like, everybody was just all these freaking young, I was the oldest one in the room, all these like young geniuses, right? And it was cool. We had these meetings where they would make us go around the room every time and do an introduction of who we are and what we've done. So that way, by the end of the time we did it, we all had kind of our elevator pitch of who we were. We kind of fine-tuned it with every person that we met. They brought in people from Fox Searchlight, Fox Network, Fox Studio. They brought in a guy who broke down the whole studio system for us. They brought in showrunners and directors and actors. I ended up getting an episode from that show. Marcus Stokes was another guy who ended up getting an episode. We both did episodes of Life in Pieces because that guy liked us when we shouted the show. This guy, Slick Naeem, who's, oh my gosh, Slick is so talented. He is one of those dudes, when you talk to him, just seems very kind of unassuming and quiet or whatever, and he's a freaking genius. And he, like, you know, one of the guys they brought in did one of those things of like, hey, can I keep in touch with you? And then the guy was on Snowfall, and he's like, hey, can I come and shadow you on Snowfall? And then a director dropped out, and next thing you know, Slick is directing Snowfall. You know, some ex-rapper from Brooklyn or from the Bronx is now directing a network show, you know? So for me, Fox, I think, was definitely the experience that I enjoyed the most. But, you know, ABC, I think, is what helped people take me seriously and, like, got me in rooms in terms of getting meetings and stuff like that. Like, that's, and, like, even applying to NBC, because after I met with Karen Horn, that's one of the people I met with at NBC because of Carol Kirshner, I didn't get in, but because I applied, both CBS and NBC rejected me from their programs. But because I applied, they invited me to stuff. So that mixer where I got my agents was from NBC. How I know Jeannie Mao from CBS is she invites me to those speed dates, you know. And it's funny because even on those speed dates, the show that I wanted, I didn't get paired with. But, like, as we were changing tables, I slid in and I'm like, hey, I'm not your person, but I'm going to stay here until your person shows up. And I pitched myself and I ended up getting a meeting with that lady. So, like, you just don't know, you know, sometimes people be, like, offended and that you're being too pushy, and you have to take that risk. You know, you have to use your spidey senses of when to back off. But, you know, you have to be aggressive.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's
trying to pick somebody up at a bar aggressive. Like, you don't go, when you're trying to get someone to sleep with you, you don't go like, hi, my name is Angela. Here's a picture of my body naked. Here's a list of people that you can talk to that can tell you that I'm really great in bed. And, you know, here's a list of my last boyfriends and the kinds of what, you go, hi, my name is Angela. And then you see what they say back. And if they say hi and then look somewhere else, then you go, okay, time for me to back off, right? You don't keep going in. Same thing when you're trying to, like, meet somebody, a network with somebody. Say hi, say who you are. Don't talk about your job or what you do or what you want to be doing or what you're good at and all that stuff until you know they're actually interested in talking to you. Very important.
Yeah. I always say it's like, just be cool. Just be cool. All right, great. Molly, I think we're getting short on time, so we'll just blast through our last audience questions.
Well, I want to go back then to something that Sherry asked earlier, because I know that you have a lot of tips and tricks about how to be prepared. So I want you to touch on those.
Oh, so my like specific prep process kind of?
Yeah.
All right. So I always read the script, just read it. And I don't write down any notes. And anywhere that I have a reaction, like if I laugh, I put like a little check mark. If I laugh really hard, I put like a star. If there's a moment that I feel like, oh, whatever, I'll put like a little surprise, whatever. I'll just real shorthand, real fast, if whatever my immediate reaction is, because you only can read the script once for the first time, one time. And then after that, you don't know if you're reacting to what you were supposed to react to, or because it's real, you know what I mean? So I do that, and then I read it again, and then I write down ideas I might have. I use an app called Scriptation, which I love because you can write apps, and then write notes, and then as you get revised pages, it'll transfer your notes onto the new pages. So, and I like to color code my notes. Notes from the producers or the showrunner is always purple, so that way I know anything in purple supersedes any other notes. So if I'm like, oh, it'd be great if he ate a banana in the scene, and then I see in purple, make sure he's eating an apple, but then I also see written in green, make sure he's eating a banana, I know to only listen to the purple one. And so then I do a grid where it's like in Excel. And what I'll do too, can I send you guys like a PDF or something, and maybe you can just email it to everybody?
Absolutely, yeah.
So I do a grid where I literally, the first column is just like, what is the scene? And I guess it's from this side. I don't know if I'm flipped around on you guys. So what is the scene and what is the set? Like scene 1, bedroom, Angela talks on computer. And then I have a column of tone notes, so anything specific in the tone meeting that I need to make sure I hit on in that scene. objective. What is the objective of what's happening in this, you know, what is like a basic synopsis of what's happening? Then what's the character objectives in the scene? And then if there's anything special, if it's a show like, I always have a camera column. So there's any special shots or special equipment I think I might need, I write that down. And if it's a show like, I did American Soul, I'll have a music column. So anything that's a musical or performance, I'll put all those notes there. If it's stunts, I'll have a stunts column, anything that I need to worry about. So I basically break it down so I look at one line of the scene and I can see all of my notes kind of separately in terms of how I want it. I use an app called Shot Designer to do all of my shot lists. I like to sit in the sets if possible and do my shot list while I'm in the sets because I can stand up and kind of act them out. It makes it easier for me. Again, my shot list is always the plan, but I always make sure that I can pivot. I always try to start with my widest first, so that way when I get into the coverage, if I find I can do something different, I can still make changes. And then I try to, the night before, I will kind of make a shorthand page of just that day's work with my notes. And for me, kind of writing it out again helps me remember everything. And it's funny because then I put that note into my scriptation, and then most of the time I don't even look at it because it's always, I already have it in my chest. I've already digested it and kind of know what it is. And I have I'll take a glance at what my shot list is before I'll start. But then if I get stuck on something or if I'm like, this isn't working, then I have that reference to go back and look at it. And then I'm a big fan of meetings. I love a good concept meeting. Molly, I know you've been in my production meetings back when I was first AD. I love a good meeting, and I love an efficient meeting. So I don't like to do a lot of figuring stuff out before I like to figure stuff out before the meeting, but I like to ask a lot of questions and make sure a lot of the things that I'm not really sure about I have handled before we actually start shooting.
Great. This has been incredibly informative. I wonder if you can just, as we wrap up, can you talk a little bit about, what your goals, what you're planning on doing, assuming that, the world comes back to some version of normal?
I just want to work this year right now. I'll be honest, I'm not even sure if I'm going to work the rest of the year the way things are going because the nature of our job is large groups of people in small confined spaces.
Yeah.
So who knows? I don't know. I like TV a lot. I think, like I said, I would be interested in maybe doing a feature for Netflix or something like that. I think it would be fun. I'm trying to stay in Atlanta as much as I can, again, because I got kids. And I think really all I'm trying to do right now for my immediate next few years future is just kind of level up on the kind of shows that I'm doing. I'm getting Legacies was a big jump for me. Getting Carol's second act was a big jump for me. It's, doing a network sitcom on CBS, and oh my gosh, Kyle MacLachlan and Patricia Heaton, I got to work with them. It was awesome. So just to continue to keep jumping up to kind of to me, Slutty Teenage Bounty Hunters, I love weirder shit. So being able to, do kind of more weird and being up for the kind of things I've been meeting for have been a lot less just kind of your standard sitcom or your standard, drama kind of thing. It's been stuff that's a little bit more interesting, or a little bit more prestige. So for me, it's just, trying to level up a little bit. But it's been fun, man. I love it. And I love, I don't know, I want to help as many other folks from Georgia trying to get in. There needs to be more of us up and in and out there. Well,
that's why we're doing this. And that's why you're great. Thank you so much for your time. We really, really, really appreciate it. We'll definitely get the information out that you want to send to us, and then this will be online exclusively with Film Impact Georgia. So you'll be able to send it to people who will be like, hey, how do I break into industry? You could be like, here, just watch this video. And also anybody else.
My email is, and here's the thing, just don't add me to your, email list, or invite me to your one-man show, or send me your scripts to read and just give me feedback. I won't do any of that. I'm saying no to all of that. If you have a question that didn't get answered today, angelagomes@mac.com is my email. You can email me and I will respond to you with an email. But if I find out you spam me, I'm going to come find you. Right?
Thank you.
I know I talk a lot, so we didn't get to probably as many questions as we probably.
No, this was amazing. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we'll see. Oh, we have a couple more of these coming up. Molly, can you pitch some of the ones that we have coming up, please?
Yeah. So our next Ask a Pro Anything event is next Thursday at 3 p.m. as well. It is with Natalie Metzger. She's a Spirit Award nominated producer whose credits include The Werewolf, Greener Grass, Thunder Road, The Robbery, Little Dickie's Freaky Friday, Matt Pat's Game Lab. I mean, it kind of goes on and on. She's currently in post-production for Jim Cummings' film The Beta Test, which just wrapped production. And she's in production for a baseball documentary called It Ain't Over. So it's pretty incredible that she's giving us her time for that. So that will be next Thursday. And then I also want to mention the distribution lab that we're doing with Seed and Spark that is completely free, and that will be on Friday. And so we'll put links to both of those, and we'll be emailing all of you guys. But again, please follow us on Instagram and then join our Facebook group, Film Impact Georgia Community, because that way you can, like I said, we're constantly, anything that we find that's free right now, like we're posting in there, and it's pretty active during this time.
And let us know if you have any more people you'd like to see, or the types of people, or any other suggestions on how we can make this better. So thank you all very much, and we'll see you.